In this video, I'm going to get you started with your first Python program. We're going to talk about printing. We're going to talk about some of the error messages that Python will give and some shortcuts that'll help us work faster. So to open up Pyscripter, I'm going to click on this icon down here. Now I've enlarged all my font to make this easier to read, I hope. So up top, we have this screen. Python creates some default text for you. I'm not going to get into what this is right now because it's not important. One of the great things about Python is it lets you get into your programming quickly without worrying about lots of fluff. So I'm going to select all of this by pressing Control, or holding Control and tapping A, and then delete. Okay, so now I've got a big blank document just as I like. I'm going to type in print, parentheses. If I just type in that first opened parend, it'll automatically create a closed parend for me. Pyscripter is also trying to suggest some things that I might want to do. I'm not going to worry about that right now. And if I want to close this and get it out of the way, I'll just press Escape. I could also just go ahead and start typing. And I want to type a quotation mark and then hello world. Okay, great. Again, I can ignore this box if I want to. Now I want to run my program. I can run it by clicking on the green button here, but I want folks to start getting into the habit of using shortcuts. The shortcut to run the program is Alt-RR. You do not need to hold Alt, just tap it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Alt-RR, runs my program, prints hello world down here. Great. Now, one thing that can be frustrating is making mistakes in Python. So we're going to start off by doing a lot of those mistakes on purpose and seeing what happens so we can start to learn about how to fix them. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the closing parentheses right there. And I'm going to try and run it again. I click Alt-RR and run it. All right, all this red pops up on the screen. This is great. This is Python communicating with me, trying to tell me you did something wrong and I want to help you fix it. These small gray dots here you can use to enlarge or shrink this window at the bottom. Since my font size is so large, I'm going to need to make this a little bit bigger so that we can see the error message that Python gives me. Okay, so first of all, it tries to bring your attention to where it thinks the error is occurring. It thinks it's occurring on line 3. I hope this shows up in the video. There's a tiny little 3 right here. I have 1, 2, 3 lines to this tiny program, even though 2 of those lines are blank. If I click over here, that red line goes away. But luckily, it also says down here, okay, in file, just named module 1, I haven't actually saved this file anywhere yet. It thinks there's an error on line 3. This is really handy information. It thinks there's a syntax error. So syntax is sort of how you write your code. It has a lot to do with things like parentheses, quotation marks, and symbols that aren't letters of the alphabet. Unexpected EOF while parsing. Okay, so there's a lot of terminology in here. I'm mainly going to focus on EOF. EOF stands for end of file. Things ended, but it was unexpected that they ended. It was unexpected because Python thought you wanted to do more. You had this open parentheses here, this open parend, and it expected you to do something with it. And when you were done, it expected you to close that parend. So that's why I got that error there. If I put that parentheses back, now I can run my program just like before. Okay, so let's look at, before we do more errors, let's look at some other things we can do with print. So we printed hello world. We can also print some numbers. So I just tapped the number line on my keyboard and I can go ahead and run that. Great, so I've got a number printed out down here. That all looks good. I can do some operations on numbers. What if I add these together? See what I get? Okay, I get their sum, 151, as I would expect. That's excellent. What if I do something a little bit stranger? What if I add 87 and not 64, but hello? Let's see what happens here. Does Python understand what to do with a plus sign between a number and some text? By the way, in programming language, we talk about text. We call it strings. So it's a string because it's a string of letters all strung together. All right, so if I run it now, what happens? All right, a whole different error. Some different things happened. It's telling me what line of code is the problem with this big red bar. There's this tiny text down here that says type error, unsupported operand types for int and string. Again, there's all this jargon. It's a little hard to understand. Int is short for integer. str is short for string. I tried to add an integer, 87, to a string, hello. It doesn't know how to do that. That operation is unsupported. All right, so I have to fix that. Now, you'll also notice that a different window popped up down here. This is my messages. What I had before was the Python interpreter. So if I click over here, I can go back to that. And it also gives me an error message in big red. And it's the same error, right? Type error. Unsupported operand types for int and string. All right, so that's useful information. So it turns out I can't do this. Well, let's go back and put 64 in here. Now it is in quotation marks. Will Python let me do this? Let's find out. Nope, it doesn't like that either. It says, it can't perform this operation for an integer and a string. So it doesn't realize that 64 seems like a number to me, but it's in those quotation marks, so it's actually a different thing. All right, so we'll get rid of those quotation marks. No, actually, let's leave those quotation marks. Try something different. What happens if I also put the 87 in quotes and run this? Okay, that's kind of interesting. Something different happened. There was not an error, if you see this right here. This is actually my old error. Everything just scrolls up, right? You can see all the old text that was on here. So if I go to the very bottom after these 3 greater than signs, you can see this is my new run of the program. This is the output. This is the printing from the new run of the program right here, 8764. All right, so the plus sign, it combined these 2 strings, these 2 pieces of text into one. It just put them together. The technical term is it concatenated them. That it would be concatenate. But we don't need to worry about that too much right now. Main thing is it put them together. So sometimes addition means addition, like in math. But for strings, it means put these things together. Join them together like there are some train cars and you're hooking them together. Cool. So we saw some different things that we can do with the plus sign here. And we just saw 2 different errors that occur. A type error. And remember from before, if I get rid of this parentheses here, a syntax error. So I'm just going to create another one, syntax error there. Actually, before we go, we're going to do one more error and see what happens. What if I have mismatching quotation marks? All right, I'm going to go back in and put in hello, but I'm going to delete the second quotation mark. Let's see what happens here. Now, even before I run the program, I get this red squiggly underline. This is telling me something is wrong. And in fact, if I put my mouse over it, it says syntax error, EOL, while scanning string literal. EOL, much like EOF, stands for end of line. Right? This line ended, but we were still looking for a string. Python expected you to be typing in a string because you had this quotation mark, and then there was no string. So that's the problem there. So this is nice. It tells you before you even run your program. But suppose I didn't notice that. Suppose I had a much larger program and I didn't notice and I tried to run it. Oh, but I'm not going to click this button. I could. But I'm going to type in Alt-RR. It's quicker to not have to take my hands off the keyboard. All right, so I get my big red line. Tells me what line the problem is on. And down here, I get another syntax error, but a different syntax error this time. Now it's an EOL, end of line, while looking for a string.